this is John for MTG Nexus, coming at you with some Boros burn this morning. As a friendly reminder, if you like lightning bolt based content, especially in the modern format, please consider subscribing to the channel, as we aim to be the most informative lightning bolt based channel on modern on YouTube. So, time to get back to the focus of the channel, which is burn decks, prowess decks, etc., especially in modern. This particular list is by Bosseidon, one of the frequent contributors to the Burn Discord. This was his latest list to 5.0. There's a couple peculiarities that we'll get to in a second, but this is being recorded here on Saturday morning and will be released later in the day. Probably not going to get through the entire league before work, as I have about an hour window to do some video work here, so... What is going on with this list? So, the two main peculiarities are 61 card main deck and the surgical extraction in the sideboard. 61 card main deck is kind of Poseidon's, I guess, compromise at wanting 20 lands, but really not wanting to run 20 lands. And then fitting in a one of Grim Lavamancer in the main deck, which I think is largely a holdover from the Incinerator builds he'd been running. With all the blue decks he's been running into. Hasn't been a huge fan of Incinerator lately. Personally, his opinion, not necessarily mine. Haven't really played enough Burn to know which version is superior at the moment. And then the other innovation / difference is he runs surgical extraction in the sideboard, as opposed to things like Lantern or Relic or Rest in Peace, any of that kind of stuff. And this is primarily because he's boiled down two matchups that boil down to two cards, and feels that targeting those specific cards is worth more than actually having hard dedicated graveyard hate. Those two matchups are the blue Uro piles. The key card for them is Uro. It's basically impossible to beat a Uro on the battlefield, gaining 3 life a turn. And then within Dredge, he targeted Creeping Chill as the card that most frequently allows them to beat a good burn draw. So to that end, he's running Surgical Extraction as opposed to hard or targeted graveyard effects beyond Surgical Extraction. Beyond that, the main deck's all 4-0s, which is pretty clean. Not really anything to argue there. The 4 Skullcracks in the main's a pretty nice thing to have. Any copies of Searing Blaze are on the sideboard. That's a pretty reasonable card to have in the sideboard. There aren't a ton of creature decks running around in terms of decks you want to have a hard Searing Blaze for. That said, we'll probably run into like elves or humans first matchup and instantly regret that, but that's the thought process behind the blazes on the board. And then, yeah, we have the full 4 Boros Charms, 4/4 Helix, full 4 Riftbolt, 4/4 Skewer. So everything's a clean 4 of, except for the one Lavamancer. The one thing about his lists is he does tend to go high on the number of canopy lands. The one thing I stressed when the canopy lands first came out was if the more canopy lands you're going to run, the more lightning helixes you wanted to run. And now granted, that was in an era when aggressive decks were a little bit more prevalent. You're more likely to be in racing situations in terms of actual damage races, as opposed to racing what your opponent is doing in terms of like resolving a Titan or trying to kill your opponent before they can get a Cryptic Lock set up or an Uro returned. So while we are racing in a lot of terms with a burn deck, it's a little bit less actual life total racing. It's more racing to set up or kill our opponent before they can set up what they're doing in the format now. One other thing in this list is it is a 1/0 Lurrus the Dream Den as a companion in the sideboard. When there was discussion in the Burn Discord a week or two back, when he was Poseidon was considering running Lurrus, I mentioned that Lurrus probably comes up probably once every 10 to 15 games without there being a dedicated, like, anything in the deck. So no Seal of Fires, no Mishra's Baubles. You know, and then I was listening to the Midweek Metagame podcast, so take this with a bit of a grain of salt, but there are people that know what they talk about on there, including Bob the Dog, aka Gabriel Nassif, talking about Andrew Cuneo, who is a noted Magic, a pro's pro, so to speak. I don't believe he's a Hall of Famer, but he's a lot pro that a lot of pros respect and have built a lot of important decks in Magic's history. Noted that if your companion wins you 1 out of 100 games, it's worth the sideboard slot over the loss of a sideboard slot. So, to that note, I think Lurrus has definitely earned its stripes in that regard, because generally it comes up like at least once a league, as long as I don't forget about it, that it's a card that can either win us a game outright or buy us enough time to maybe hit a draw spell or two to win the game. So, that said, I'm going to try to get a couple matches in and get the video up today, because I know it's been a kind of a dearth of burn content the last couple weeks, and honestly, dearth of content the last week or so, due to some stuff going on. So, that said, let's jump into some matches. Forgot to mention this. This could be an interesting morning, because this is about an hour, about 45 minutes before the Modern Challenge. So a lot of times you're going to be seeing like either off the wall decks or really good grinders. So sometimes this is a awkward time to be creating content if you're not getting ready for the Modern Challenge, which I am not, because about the time that the challenge begins, I have to actually start getting ready for work. So opponent's mulliganing to 6 at least. What is their deck in Blackblade? Okay. Should just kind of pop this out, because I have a tendency to forget about my companion. Well, it may not be relevant in many games with burn. You do want to try to maximize your awareness of it. Oh, mirror match. Okay. Interesting. So, I think I'm just going to maximize mana here. If our opponent gets to resolve a Helix, they get to resolve a Helix. It's kind of whatever. Nope, Eidolon. Okay. Response to the trigger, I'm just going to go ahead and Helix that. Might be incorrect to point it at our opponent's creature there, because we are a little low on resources. Let's go ahead and let this trigger happen, fetch up a basic mountain and bolt it. Some people like to wait before to see what they're going to draw, but if we already know we're going to fetch and bolt this anyway, may as well just get it done with, and kind of, if we're drawing a land, it will draw us in the land anyway. So just going to put Lurrus into our hand. There's no one card next turn that we could draw here to kill our opponent, and at 20 life it's going to be difficult for our opponent to kill us directly. And so I like to have the option of it, should we draw a 4th land, that we just get to slam Lurrus and slam Monastery Swiftspear, continuing to pressure their resources. This is where not fetching Not fetching a second white source could potentially come back to bite us a little bit. Here, we're going to punish our opponent by just unloading on their thing, and then we get to lock them. This Boros charm, and we just get to kill them. So, but basically by doing this, we lock our opponent out of the game. But because we drew the lava spike, we just get to kill them. So. On the sideboard, we're reasonably well set up for the mirror. We have 3 core Firewalkers. We have potentially 3 Path to Exile and 2 Searing Blaze. I'm going to bring in the 3 Path, the 3 core Firewalker, go down the 4 copies of Eidolon, because I really don't like Eidolon in the mirror match. Grim Lavamancer is also a liability in the mirror match. Sure, it can control the board potentially. But, you know, when the minimum you're looking at bolts, Rift Bolt, Skewer, and sometimes Helix, sometimes Path. You know, eating a bolt's fine, but, you know, trading card for card, I guess that argument doesn't hold as much weight when you're running Lurrus. But then I also get down a couple copies of Boros Charm. So it does change the damage equation a little bit to go down a Boros Charm or 2. Bring in 1 copy of Searing Blaze. I don't like going up too many Searing Blazes because some people actually cut a bunch of creatures in the matchup. Unlikely from our opponent's perspective that they'll cut, especially on the play. A lot of people like to leave on Eidolon and such. I personally board out Eidolon a lot in the mirror match. This hand is both positive and negative. The huge positive here is we have turn 2 Firewalker or turn 2 Lightning Helix potentially, but we also have no 1-mana plays. So while this hand is a keep, especially on the draw, our opponent has a fast 1-drop draw. It could really bury us here, especially if we don't draw like Bolt or something. It looks like we're going to hit by, yep, Goblin God. Alright. Searing Blaze is not terrible. Fortunately, all we have is land and pass. If our opponent kept a 1-lander here, I think we're ecstatic. Let's get rid of the critics on top. Gonna run out Firewalker here. I could just cast Helix, but if our opponent is wasting their mana pathing, then I think we're okay. And I think we're gonna find out real quick if they have a path here. Yep, looks like they do. Unsurprising. So we're going to 12 and then 10 this turn minimum, and that's if they don't draw another land. Okay, they drew the land. Bolt. So our best play here is to Helix this main phase. The problem is if we tap here, we're just dead to 4 bolts, which we know our opponent's hand's all gas, but I do think we have to take that risk. Like, our opponent kept a very good hand in the matchup. You know, especially if they drew the second land. What them passing probably tells us is that their hand is all 2-mana spells. And if our opponent had a Lightning Helix there, they should have fired it off main phase. But Doesn't look like they do. Swiss Spear's a little awkward here. I still think we play it. Like it turns on like searing effects. But I think I'm okay with that. Not going to play any spells. Once again, Lightning Helix is a card that I want to play around if at all possible. We do have Boros Charm to fire off on instep if they are. So Boros Charm 8. So if they have a bunch of Boros Charms, it could just be flat out dead here. Is there any combination of cards? So we have a Rift Bolt coming off, which is 4 damage. 4 damage, 4 damage, 4 damage. So we could kill our opponent here. I guess we have to go for that because we're not. I got to be mindful of my life total as much as possible. Because like if they have Bolt here, then we could just be dead. They had a Lightning Helix the whole time? That was really weird timing on that Helix if they have one. These just be Boros Charm. Okay, Helix, sure. I did not have a Rift Bolt suspended anyway. That was my Core Firewalker. So, good chance we're dead on the untap. Once again, though, unless my opponent just drew that Lightning Helix, that was really bad timing on their part. They should have done it at another point when we were tapped out. But I think just the fact that their hand has 4 spells in it, we're probably dead. I guess I can crack this, since if I... No, that's a pretty good draw. Crack that, because I could always cast Skewer the Critics, and then I really don't want to take additional damage. So if they have another Helix, it's kind of whatever here. We got a Skull Crack anyway to have a chance to win. Which is fine. That's what happens when you get behind in the mirror match and they have an answer to your Firewalker. There was some consideration to go ahead and Helix our opponent's Goblin Guide rather than taking 2 more points of damage off of it potentially. Would that have bought us another turn? Probably not, but it is something worth considering. Once again, I really don't like Eidolon in the mirror match because it's only good when you get ahead, and sometimes the burn match you don't always get ahead, so... Not the best, but not the worst. Like, double Lightning Helix is pretty good. Boros Charm's kind of whatever. Skewer the Critic is kind of whatever. Path to Answer Core Firewalker, yeah, I think we keep it, but it's definitely a borderline hand. So the reason why I say it's borderline is the fact that we don't have a 1-drop of our own of any kind other than Path, and you really don't want to be pathing your opponent's turn 1 play. So, yep. And like we draw Swift Spear here, which is kind of awkward. but if they bold it, I'm perfectly fine with that. So now we have the choice of either holding up Path to Exile here or casting Skewer the Critics while our mana isn't tight. So this might become a mana efficiency battle because we have a bunch of 2-drop spells in our hand. So I am going to go ahead and cast Skewer, although it's not necessarily the best thing to be doing here. Like answering our opponent's Core Firewalker, if they have one, would be nice, which is quite likely they do. Yep. Hopefully we draw a 3rd land here. Draw our own Core Firewalker. Go ahead and negate what our opponent has going on. Once again, mana efficiency is a key there. Opponent, if they have the Path, they allow us to double spell next turn anyway. And they might not have a 3rd land, so it might be their entire turn too. And 3rd land does notably unlock Lurrus at a later point in the game. That said, our opponent is much higher on resources than we are. Does not look like they have the Path to Exile. It's got to be going at this. Why would you go face here? Why would you go face? I'll skewer that now. Guess that makes sense if they're skewering this. Okay, makes more sense now, but still questionable. I think we'll just pass here. Hold up our interaction. We are behind on mana, which is a problem. But that said, they seem unable to answer our Core Firewalker at the moment. That said, they just had 2 fresh draw steps to the Path to Exile. Opponent's really pulling ahead on mana here. That's a reasonable draw. I'm just going to go ahead and helix this. One other card I used to like in this matchup when I was on the Naya or whatever versions was grabbing Klothys out of the sideboard. A lot of people think I'm nuts for liking Klothys in the Burn Mirror, but the reality is a lot of the games end up like this, where you're just doing resource exchanging, resource exchanging, resource exchanging, and then bam. Yeah, I have no reason to make any game actions right now. I'm just going to attack with Core Firewalker. Hold up Skullcrack, hold up Helix, all that nonsense. Like, our opponent really wants to find a Path to Exile. Like, they've had a number of draws. It's, again, no reason really to take any game actions. Bolt's actually a rather nice one to pair with what we have going on. 1 mana plays are important when you have a hand chock full of 2 mana plays. Once again, no reason to act. They clearly don't have Path to Exile. Another land is a nice draw as well. Going to fetch a tapped Sacred Founder here. This does allow us to unlock Lurrus in case we crack this. Sunbay Canyon. We only have 1 skull crack, so we really have to be judicious when we fire off spells. Like, a lot of it depends on how many Lightning Helixes our opponent has, how likely they are to stay alive. Once again, just continuing to fetch white sources, especially tapped while we can. This is another good draw, allows us to play a spell for 1 mana when we're a mana behind. This will probably force action from our opponent. Alright, I have no reason to act. Alright, and our opponent conceded the game. Alright, nice win the Burn Mirror, first thing out of the chute. Back for the second match with Bosseidon's Boros burn list. Show off Lurrus. Sounds pretty reasonable, especially on the play. 2/1 drops, some follow-up spells. Have a Lurrus, we're good. Downside, once again, with Lurrus is it does kind of show up the fact that we're likely burn, and there's a few decks I've seen run Lurrus. I've seen burn run it. I've seen Mill run it, and I've seen Bogles run it. So here it's a matter of question mark what land to fetch. A lot of people will advocate for fetching basic mountain because you could draw Inspiring Vantage on turn 2 and not want to take as much damage. I think because we have the second fetch and the Sunbay Canyon, I'm going to go ahead and fetch the basic mountain here. And I know fetching is not a huge deal, but in racing situations, mirror matches, etc., it can kind of be a big deal, and against decks with Ghost Quarter. So looks like we're up against whatchamacallit, Death and Taxes, a deck that I pretty much loathe. I'm going to be fetching Sacred Founder here, now that we've seen Ghost Quarter. We absolutely want to fetch our non-basics as much as we can. Displacer is mildly annoying. Especially if they have Eldrazi Temple. Fortunately they don't. But they probably have Scholar here. Dark Confidant. Okay. Now we just get to unload our entire hand. I guess we hold Boros Charm in reserve here. Don't think it matters a lot. Their deck doesn't play too many 1-drops main. They might play like Giver of Runes here. Guessing this Confidant's just blocking something. Okay, so you're dead? Cool. The old turn 3 kill. Again, our opponent's own damage kind of facilitated that. So, I know Bosseidon said he'd been running into this matchup on and off a lot. But notably, we are against black-white. So, probably just better to go with Eldrazi Displacer. X. Eldrazi Taxes. So go all the way up to TKS. Thing is, like, some of these lists are running. This one's running Dark Confidant. We just board. Definitely boarding out Eidolon against the Vile deck. And then Boros Charm is generally my second cut. Definitely want the Paths. Definitely want the Searing Blazes. So the other alternatives we have is we could bring in Boros Charms, bring in Smashes. The thing with Smashes is if they're not on the Stoneforge version, Smash gets considerably worse. No, actually they have Scholars, so it's fine. And then I guess we have to bring in a Boros Charm anyway. I don't like going too hard on these like situational cards. Like Path, okay, Path's a bit of a situational card in what it executes, but you know, against a creature deck, you're almost always going to have a target, or if you have a dead card, you're kind of whatever. Oh, this hand. This hand's good, but also bad. Like, the one-lander is terrible in this matchup, especially 2 copies of Lightning Helix can be awkward, especially with no white sources and no real creature interaction. We draw a land even, it's not great, so I think we have to mulligan. Okay, immediately going to 5. So we either have the one-lander or the all-land hands. Keep this hand. Put back. Mountain. Skewer. Bolt, I guess. So we can go Swift Spear in the Searing Blaze. Obviously gets awkward if they have really want to hold out onto that for the Searing Blaze, but I think we have to just go with crack that in case they have Lead and Arbiter. We don't get locked out of the game. Not like we're very likely to win from here anyway, but, you know, especially since in the post-board games our opponent usually has things like, okay, so they are on a Shadow Spear. Okay. Equip for 1, equip for 2. So just do the thing and hope they don't have a Burnt and Forge Tender. Okay, they don't, so that's at least a positive. Though I still think we're a severe dog from this point. Especially if they hit us with a Arbiter. Shadow Spear, sure. Okay, Core Firewalker. Huh? Pretty hard to beat that one. So here's the thing, right? So I did bring in my 3 Path to Exile, which is a positive. The one downside is, how frequent is this Stone Blade? Is the Shadow Spear. Appears to be something that might be kind of unique to our opponent's deck list. Not a bad choice. So I have three Path to Exile to look out for. The reason why I'm considering conceding, or at least concealing information, is this Lavamancer is kind of important information, but it only being one of 61 cards in our deck may not be terribly relevant. Once again, Shadow Spear is also kind of cute because it invalidates if they go to activate this vial, we have to crack this Bloodstained Mire. Yeah, don't want to get got by Leonin Arbiter, so we're just cracking it. Okay, another Core Firewalker, sure. Not that this situation is beatable either way, but sure. Give her runes. So we have like a 1-turn window to draw path. We don't, so. Well, I still think we're dead here. Need to rip path to win, and even then, we still have the Shadow Spear kind of chilling out. So, because Grim can take care of Giver, but then, once you're just that low on resources, you're kind of out of luck anyway. Definitely want the 3rd smash now that we've seen the Shadow Spear and Stoneforge Mystic out of them. This hand's kind of I guess this hand's fine. We got double path. Searing Blaze, we're not relying on any type of fetch land nonsense. Then we have Lurrus as a backup. Yeah, I think I'm fine keeping this hand. It's not great, but then again, I don't know that too many hands in this matchup are going to be great. Lurrus makes this hand at least more tenable. We could get hit by a turn 2 TKS, which would kind of suck. I think the last time I played this matchup, I was on Red-Black Lurrus. Play that out. Obviously, we're not able to do anything much other than cast Path to Exile, maybe in response to something stupid here. Feels really much like our opponent's on TKS here. That at least gives us something to do with our mana this turn. If they path us, all the better for us, I suppose. Eldrazi Displacer will be coming down next turn. Gotta be mindful here of Thought Not Seer is bad. They have Core Firewalker, we're really SOL. I think we have to go for the path line. Without a fetch land, be able to hold up Blaze. Blaze is really bad here. Having to burn the paths on these guys is just kind of crappy. I'll probably take, I guess, Blaze? I don't know. So many cards here punish us for this attack, but I still think we have to make it. So it looks like they just have none of them. Put Lurrus into my hand. Hope they don't have another Thought Not Seer. Alright. So, yeah, Stoneforge Mystic can be a bit of a biznitch here. Especially for Batterskull. Kind of funny, like their main deck's already a bit of a rough matchup for burn, and then you add like things like Core Firewalker and it really becomes a nightmare. So like they're chilling on like 4 cards over there, one of which is Batterskull. I really don't want to play Lurrus here for no value, but I still think mana efficiency wise it's the thing we do. Once again, we still got to draw either a path or a smash the smithereens to get out of this, and with the vial sitting on 3, they could easily have like this could easily be a Flicker Wisp. Oh, just Displacer, sure. Because we all know that's an easy card to beat. Lots of the Thalia, just Skullcrack you. Why wouldn't you attack with Batterskull there? That just seems dubious. So I only really have 2 plays here. One is play Goblin Guy as a chump blocker, and the other is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But they can just kind of flicker both of our blockers anyway. I think it's just play Helix. It's the most mana efficient turn we have. Was cracking that fetch land or canopy land, try to find a smash to smithereens here, but we're just kind of, or they can just do that. No sense in holding up mana here anyway, because they just have like a boatload of things to get here, so go ahead and concede. But it's a tough matchup. Yeah, I know what your hand is. I don't really care. Cool. It's a tough matchup even without the Stoneforge Mystic package. Because a lot of times they're packing core Firewalkers, like some of the versions I'm looking at are packing like Burrington Forge Tenders. The thing with, like, in general, I really don't like these Leonin Arbiter piles. But the thing with like the black mana, you have access to Tide Hollow Sculler, which, when you're only running a small black splash, makes sense. And they showed Dark Confidant, and then you add Stoneforge Mystic into the thing. Like, the basic package is Feast and Famine, Fire and Ice, Batter Skull, and our opponent also has Shadow Spear on the sideboard. Makes a lot of sense. Basically, our opponent was showing us that they just had us beat regardless. So, but like, we were looking for a Smash to Smithereens for that, for the Batter Skull, but otherwise we still weren't beating the rest of the board anyway. And our game won't let us draw a card. Cool. Anyways, I will be back with a quick wrap up for today's couple of matches in 1 second. Alright, we're back for a quick wrap up with a couple matches of Boros Burn here today. Obviously, mirror match. We drew fairly well for the mirror match. Played, I think, pretty reasonably. Opponent didn't have the Past Exile for the core Firewalker, died in the post-board game. As far as Death and Taxes, so personally, I hate the card Leonin Arbiter. I think it is trash. It is a very cheesy way to win Magic games. It is a card that is only good in very good circumstances. Otherwise, it is not the best. That said, the Death and Taxes shells that have surrounded it, especially the Black-White Eldrazi Taxes deck over time, I have been very impressed with. I've had a number of fantastic battles against the deck with various red variants, whether it be Burn. I've also played against it with Black-Red Prowess. I do think Black-Red Prowess is much better capable of handling what the deck is doing. I think the addition of the black cards, especially if you're playing the version that Doomwake had, that had like the Infernal, whatchamacallit's the one black exile, a colorless creature. I think that certainly helps the matchup. I think the closest I've ever come to running a Death and Taxes list is this Orzhov Death Shadow Stoneforge Mystic package deck. And I think, and I never thought I would say this willingly, I think I'm going to go back and run the Orzhov Death Shadow deck a couple of times in preparation for working on Black-White Death and Taxes at some point. Might not be something we do like in the next week or so, but something that is on my radar. Obviously, the Death Shadow deck is, a little bit more hand disruption based and not mana disruption based, but they do have a lot of the same elements in terms of like the Stoneforge package, Tide Hollow Sculler, some of that kind of stuff. So their play patterns are probably a little bit more closer to what I normally than what do I normally play with, like Burn and Prowess. That said, I can understand why, especially the black-white version of Death and Taxes, or even the mono-white version with like Core Firewalkers and stuff, if they have the Stoneforge Mystic package especially, can really give Burn trouble. The question I have, and it's not an answer I'll probably get until I actually pick up and play the deck some, is what do you do against grindy, disruptive decks like Uro Snow Piles and such? Maybe someone who's a little bit more familiar with the Death and Taxes variants would let me know how kind of that match plays out. I do think that like Ether Vial obviously helps with that kind of nonsense, with like Counterspell deck, but that's an interesting one that I'd be interested in seeing, like how that deck in particular plays out. But as far as the Burn deck, I mean, we had some interesting matches. That's not really much more you can ask for a Saturday morning. We had two very close matchups, and they were both a lot of thinking, trying to sideboard correctly, what hands to keep, etc. And I don't even know if we didn't mulligan to 4 in game number 2 against D&T that we would have won anyway. So, and as much as we kind of got outvalued and whatever in game 2 and game 3, we stole a win on turn 3 in game number 1. So, variance kind of worked both ways in that matchup. So, a lot of fun getting back in the swing of some more steady content creation here, trying to find a balance between a lot of things going on right now. So, I hope y'all can bear with me while that's going on. I'm going to get back into streaming sometime in the next couple days. I am working the next several days, and I think the personal stuff that's come up has started to finally clear up a little bit, so hopefully that will things will remain on as kind of a steady ship, so I can get back to doing what y'all want to see, which is content. So this has been John for MTG Nexus.